Welcome and hello to everybody on this Saturday afternoon of a long weekend, no less. So you are not going anywhere, and we are certainly not going anywhere. And you are at Henley Business School, but you are at Henley Business School in South Africa today, and you are at Henley Business School in the UK today. So you are certainly in multiple places at once. We are coming to you in your home. So I hope that you are wearing your black Steve Jobs turtlenecks. Let me have a look, see. It might still be a little bit hot, but I'm sure that you'll be pulling them over just shortly. No, it's okay. I can't really see, so don't worry too much. A few things before we get to today's really hot topic. I hope you're ready. I hope you have your notebooks close by. But on Monday, of course, it's Heritage Day here in South Africa, and I've been wondering about a song for Heritage Day. And so the team really wants you to choose what our Heritage Day play out song is going to be. So if you will use this hashtag behind me, please, hashtag SME Sessions. And if you'll go onto Twitter, or if you'll use the Q&A function there at the bottom of the screen, you can think about it all session long. And if you will then please share your suggestion with us, that would be phenomenal. It might also be the beginning of a hashtag SME Sessions playlist that we put together at the end of this particular series. So let's do that together. If you'll put thumb to phone, then we can get that going. Then the next thing is, today's session is a little bit different. It requires of you to come at it with a sense of possibility. So we've heard that a lot of you are in service businesses, you run events companies, you run beauty companies, you run businesses that are involved in travel, and we know that it'll be a while still before those companies are back in business. This is the reality that we face. And while you're keeping those businesses on life support, and while you're making sets of decisions about those businesses, today we want to invite you to perhaps step change a little bit. We want you to think about what you would do if you could start another business, and what that business might be if it could be an online business, what that might look like. How could you put that incredible business experience that you've gained to date to work, but in a different way? And of course, the platform that is all pervasive, that we all rely on to connect us to the broader world, and in fact, in this very moment to each other, is digital. So if you'll pull a little bit of paper closer, or whatever note-taking device works for you, and if you'll just write down what you would start at a business now, or what kind of thing you would look to tap into if you could, then that is going to be the beginning of possibility. So today we're going to have Norbert talk to us about how, as a non-techie, you build a digital business. And this is where you're going to start to channel your inner Steve Jobs. And before I bring Norbert back to us, you guys got to meet him yesterday, I do want to ask you this question. If you could go to the Q&A, and if you could let us know on a scale from 1 to 5, how comfortable you are with the idea of building a digital business, that would be really helpful for us. So you're going to find the Q&A button right at the very bottom of your screen that you're looking at the moment. We're going to be able to see what you say. You're going to be able to see what each other is saying. And on a scale from 1 to 5, 1 would be, I'm not comfortable with the idea of being the founder of, and running a digital business at all. And 5 would be, we're already there and we're killing it. And then 2, 3, 4, anywhere in the middle. So I'm going to give you a few seconds to just get your perspectives in. Norbert, I know you're on standby, ready for us to go. If we can bring your video up, if we can bring your sound up, I'm going to hand over to you in a moment. I just want to see what people are saying in the Q&A around where they find themselves. Shout out to some of my students that I'm seeing online today. Thank you for being here. Fantastic. It's such a range, guys. So Owen, Zema, Yannick, others are saying they're on a full 5. And then there's others of us, right, that are on a 1, that are saying, okay, I think I might be needing to do this thing, but this is new to me. And we're speaking to you today. We are in the process, and it's very much a MVP, it's beta. We have set up our networking platform on our microsite. You'd have gotten the link yesterday. There are 1 or 2 gremlins there that we're starting to sort out. We are inviting you to break it for us. That's what the ITT wants to do. Team wants you to do. Some of us have already broken it and we're fixing it as we speak. But once we're there, you'll be able to find each other as well. And I think within this community, there will be the opportunity to share practice, as Norbert already encouraged us to do yesterday. So Norbert, I think you're looking at the same screen that I am looking at. So you will be able to see where people are. Can you bring up your sound? Can you bring up your video? Let me welcome you to the session today.
Hello. For some reason, I don't seem to be able to bring my video on. I think you need to be...
Our team in the background will help us in a moment to get you there.
Hello.
Thank you.
Hi. So first of all, hello everyone. You're probably wondering where is the black Steve turtleneck, Steve Jobs turtleneck. It's right here. I thought I first have to earn this and still have to wear the startup T-shirt first before I can put on the honorary Steve Jobs turtleneck a little bit later on today, maybe. But yeah, thanks a lot for having me back and really looking forward to this session today. Okay, shall I just roll along?
Absolutely, I'm tagging you in. We're in your very capable hands. Please tell us how to start a business as non-techies.
Okay, let's do this then. Okay, let's hop over here. All right, so I hope that's all good here. So yeah, how do you build a tech business as a non-techie? It's something that I have learned through painful own experience a couple and a number of times. I'm still, as you might remember, in a tech startup at the moment, which is called Potentially, a small team working on our product. And yeah, some good and very painful lessons learned along the way. And today I want to walk you through some of those lessons and share sort of maybe some things that you can avoid and maybe also help you fast track if you're considering making this journey. And let's not kid around. It is a little bit daunting if you're not necessarily a programmer or someone with an engineering background. Then starting a tech company might seem like something that sounds really nice and certainly sounds glamorous to some degree. But how do you actually go about doing that? And sort of looking at the thanks for Luis for sort of like asking people where they are on the spectrum in a way, looking at some of the answers. I think maybe the first thing to do is actually do take some inspiration from Mr. Steve Jobs here. And you know, lockdown is always also a good time to maybe catch up on some movies, catch up on some films. And what I can recommend is that Steve Jobs movie that came out a while ago. Some of you might have seen this film, but in this film there is a wonderful scene where Steve Jobs and his co-founder Wozniak are in an orchestra room where he's preparing the presentation for a new Apple product that he's launching. And Wozniak, his co-founder, asks him, you know, Steve, I hear every day people are saying you're such a genius, you're doing all this genius stuff, but what is it actually that you're doing? Because I mean, I've developed the hardware, somebody else has been working on the motherboards, somebody else is doing the design. What is it, Steve, that you're doing, and why do people think that you are the genius? And they're in this orchestra pit, and so Steve Jobs then sort of replies, well, you're really good at this, you're playing in a way the fiddle, you're an excellent musician, you're playing your instrument, but I'm the one who's playing the orchestra, who's bringing everyone together. And it's a really powerful scene. And before we sort of embark on this journey, let's sort of take this as a motto. And really, I think sort of the point to make here is, as the entrepreneur, you don't have to be an inventor. You don't have to be an engineer. You don't have to be a techie or a rocket scientist. Entrepreneurship is not about inventing stuff. It's about bringing people together. So you have to be the one who maybe brings those rocket scientists, those techies, and those inventors together. That's your role as an entrepreneur, as a business person. And maybe let's sort of look also sort of like really at the opposite end of this kind of stuff. So very often, of course, we glamorize the people who are coming up with new stuff, but I think it's also worthwhile remembering that, especially when we talk about online businesses, there is also success to be had with maybe bringing something that exists already in another market, so a tech system or platform that exists somewhere else, and sort of taking this idea and bringing it to your own local market in South Africa. So for example, let's say if I bring an example from the UK, a company called Streetcar, where there were two guys, Andrew Valentine and Brad Acker, who were working in the insurance industry, and they thought, okay, we're doing really nicely at a company car, a nice salary, but they thought, you know, let's switch this up. We want to have more in life. Let's become entrepreneurs. And what they did was they did a structured search on blogging websites and on the internet for startup ideas that were taking off elsewhere, that were taking off in the US. And so with this sort of structured search, looking what's working elsewhere, they came across this thing called Zipcar in America, which is a car sharing sort of platform. And they thought, well, that looks really interesting. Let's try that as well. And they launched pretty much the same concept, one for one, pretty much the same thing in the UK. And it was relatively successful in the UK. And 2 years later, they sold it for £50 million to the original US company, Zipcar. Now, some people might say, okay, they haven't been very inventive, but what they did is they brought an existing product to a new market, benefited the new market. The other company was big enough to buy them in the end, and certainly £50 million is a very decent outcome for those two people. And in Germany, there's a very big company called Rocket Internet, several billion pounds in valuation, listed on the stock market there. It's called Rocket Internet. And everything that, pretty much the only thing that this company does is employ people to look at what kind of startup ideas are working in other countries, and they clone the idea and then launch the same thing in Germany. So I think one thing that I do recommend is to, in your first foray into maybe starting a tech business, have a look around what already exists, what works elsewhere, adapt it to your local market, and launch it as well. So this, you don't have to come up with something completely new. That is a viable strategy as well. On this whole topic, since we're also sort of started off with a Steve Jobs movie, another film that I do recommend if you have got some time in lockdown and you're bored, have a look at something called The Founder as well with Michael Keaton, which again takes this point of, in some ways, how important idea creation and coming up with something new in entrepreneurship is, but also how really, really important that second skill of scaling up a business and taking it to the next level, how that's also absolutely crucial. And we're sort of sitting in between those two. So you need both of those skills. So have a look at those. Maybe at the end, if you've got some other good movie ideas that you want to share, drop them in as well. So for today's session, in a way, again, another sort of preamble to this is today I'm gonna try to stay relatively practical in terms of like giving you some recommendations for tools that you can use straight away. But that's not to stop you from dreaming big. I'm all in favor of people coming up with what's called maybe a moonshot idea and creating something that could be very transformative or world-changing. And maybe, although we are in a corona crisis, the point has to be made, there is always money around for those very big ideas as well. And there are certain places where maybe those big ideas thrive more than in other places, so especially, let's say, Silicon Valley. But there are also pockets around the world where you can build some very big ideas. And last year I visited a place in Switzerland called CSAM, which is up there as well. Fantastic place in Switzerland, billion or two in funding, stuffed with scientists. And all these scientists do is wait for entrepreneurs to come around and say, we've got this problem, can you solve it for us? And it's the job of those guys to then send away 5 or 7 scientists and come up with a practical solution to some crazy materials or solar or nano problem. And they give entrepreneurs this kind of technology for free and grant them the license for it. So it's kind of like a miracle place. It's open to you as well. So there are places around, even if you've got crazy ideas, where you can access great talent that will work on your ideas. So not to discourage you from this. And of course, we have to remember that things which seem big today, we're talking about Zoom right now, right? That seems big right now. Or we all use Google. All of those things, they effectively have started quite small at some point. It's worthwhile remembering that Google started with 2 people and was called BagRub, and nobody was using it before somebody gave them a chance, gave them $100,000, and they grew from there. Or even things like Uber, you know, this is sort of like on this slide, you can see the funding history of Uber, and in recent years, every time they've raised money, it was 1 billion, 2 billion, 5 billion. But again, something which is as big as Uber starts quite small, typically with $5,000, $10,000 first investment from maybe a family member, and then a first ticket raise of 200,000, and it grows from there. So all these big things, they start relatively small and they start humble. And they start very often by people who are not techies. And you might have come across this term of a unicorn startup. So a startup that's valued as more than 1 billion pounds. And of course, everybody is trying to create these unicorn technology companies. But while there are very few unicorns, there's also something else, and that's sort of what we call the cockroach startup in a way. And what are those cockroach startups? Well, that's kind of like the smaller guys that rather than go and raise 10 million or 50 million and then burn through the cash, they build it up in what we call like a bootstrapping way, and they build it up through sales. And these are the startups that even in a crisis, they don't go under, they survive, they're very resilient in a way, and the founders find a way to make them work. And so maybe today also, we've started several companies at the start. The first thing has to be around survival. So you have to be a cockroach, and maybe at some point, if you've stayed and survived long enough, you will turn into a unicorn. But in the first instance, it's perfectly fine to look at survival and sort of initial growth. Okay, so that kind of like is sort of a first start here. Then let's do a first jump into how to build a tech company. And in this first instance, what I'm going to do is probably throw a lot of tools at you. So I think the slides are available afterwards as well. So you will find all these links and names in there as well. But I thought maybe to start off with, I'll give you a couple of tools and sort of slides here as well. So maybe sort of like if you want to start a tech company, then my first recommendation is don't do it. Don't build a tech company, right? So what you want to do is maybe build a company, not a tech company. And by that, I mean, in the first instance, you should really try to leverage existing technology as much as you can. So if you're especially selling a product or a service, then try to piggy bank on existing platforms in whatever way possible and leverage them. So there's really enough case studies out there that you can also find relatively easily of people building very, very profitable businesses on top of Instagram, YouTube, WeChat, Amazon Marketplace, Alibaba. They don't go and have to create their own audience. They can piggy bank on those existing audiences, but they specialize in sort of the service, maybe specialize in promotions, how they present it, how they gather positive reviews, and they sell products through that. I think that should be the starting point for anyone, not to build anything, but sort of piggy bank on that. If you want to go a little bit towards the next step and maybe start to customize a little bit more than what you get with the existing platforms, then again, don't ever build anything, but really try to take advantage of free products out there. If you're trying to sell any product or any service, then platforms like Shopify give you everything out of the box to create something that looks extremely professional, works perfectly across all devices, and I can't recommend this kind of tools enough. You don't have to develop anything. You don't need any technical people involved. You can do it all yourself really quickly, and you can deliver that. If you are not selling anything, but you're trying to get people to discover you and get a professional feel across, again, there are things like Wix, Squarespace, or at the more professional end, Webflow, which really allow you to build websites extremely quickly, nice looking. Again, you don't need any technical help, and you can just get started with it. There is a little bit of a learning curve, but it's not very steep. If you want to go a little bit more professional, then some of you are probably aware of something called WordPress, which is a framework for building relatively complex websites. And again, this kind of thing has got so many plugins, hence I've put like a Swiss knife there at the bottom. You can do pretty much anything that you want with this thing. There are people who can help you modify this. You will very easily and at low cost find freelancers that help you customize the thing to your heart's content. No physical programming is involved, and you can build relatively complex platforms with this sort of WordPress system. You won't win an Oscar for the best technological website, but it will get the job done, which is the case, which is something that you should be really looking for in the first instance. Okay, with this kind of things, Webflow, WordPress, a lot of the stuff comes out of the box. It looks nice out of the box, but if you want to make it look even nicer and like make it seem like you're a pro in a way, then the fastest way to do that is typically by buying a template for this kind of platforms. And similar to going clothes shopping, effectively, you visit one of those stores, you pick out, oh, I want to look like this, and you again, based on your industry, there will be templates that do exactly what you want for your industry, for your use case, whether you're a dentist or a hair salon or a digital agency. There are those templates there. They don't cost a lot of money. A lot of them are free as well, and they will give you exactly what you need for your industry. You don't have to do anything. All you need to do is look in the right place and get those kind of things. If you want to go the next step, and also if you're looking maybe to take a little bit more advantage of social media, but at the moment you're stuck at home and you can't go outside and take great pictures maybe of stuff that you want to do, then because things have become a bit more visual, here's again a few recommendations to do that. On the free side, there's a website called Unsplash where people share really nice looking photographs. So you take advantage of that, take advantage of something called Flickr. There is a service called Lobster Media, which pulls all stuff that goes onto Instagram, this kind of photos, and you can use them. So take advantage of that. If you've got the budget, the professional services as well out there, and yeah, have a look at that. Okay, two more things sort of before we make a first break. Domain names, right? So henley.ac.ca, yeah, that's a domain name. Again, maybe the first hurdle where people go like, oh, I want to start an internet business. I've created my website using a free service. Now I also just want to have my name online. GoDaddy, name.com, a zillion other services like this out there. Buying a name on the domain name on the internet is something that's really simple. And typically these days, there are also quite nice and simple inbuilt tutorials there that allow you to set up your own professional branded email addresses using typically a service like Google Gmail for business. That's probably the cheapest and most professional service out there. If you've done that, then you would have a a website address, you would have a website or a web store already up and running. And you basically covered on all your basics. You're selling, you're interacting with your customers. So if you want to jazz it up, if you want to jazz this stuff up, then very often you might have come across these days on websites. At the bottom right corner, there might be a little chat window that opens up and it says, hey, how are you doing? Can we talk with you? And these kind of things work whether you are around or not. They're packed with some smart artificial intelligence chatbot that talks to you and answers questions about the business. And these kind of things, these little chat boxes, the services behind that are companies like Intercom, Drift, or there's again 10 other companies that do the same thing. It's a service, a plugin that you drop in again, and it creates a very personalized, always on, very professional experience for a few dollars a month. So maybe something that you want to plug into this sort of things as well. It makes things quite friendly. One very good website, I told you I was going to throw a lot of tools at you. One really good website to go and try out and have a look at is something called Product Hunt, where everyone who's developing a new platform or product sort of typically lists their service on this platform. If you're developing your own product, app, whatever you want or working on, or maybe think you will be working on, you'll probably end up announcing that this exists on this website as well, Product Hunt. That's where people find out about it. And you can find a lot of free tools, cheaper alternatives to maybe tools that you want to use on this website. So that's kind of like a recommendation around that. And all of those tools that I've mentioned so far, there's kind of like the question that you might have is, what kind of technical skills do I need to have to use those tools? And the answer is none really. And really the question should be, how quickly can you learn them? And most of those tools you can get to a decent level of competency within a few hours. On some of them, maybe it will take you a little bit longer, might take you a day or two or maybe 3 days to feel really confident with using them and getting them online. But all of those tools, they in the first instance to take your business, if you don't have a big online presence at the moment, or you want to sell a little bit more online, it shouldn't take you more than 2-3 days to use any of those tools to create something that's actually really professional by professional standards in a way. And kind of like the key thing to say here, maybe as a first point to throw out, is really most of those, the first step is really just to do this and start to do something on it. You can't break anything, and it's more about your own personal learning to just try to do this. You don't really need anyone. The best thing is if you try to learn this yourself. It might do your head in to start with, but most of those systems are very intuitive. They guide you along. If you don't know how to do something, somebody else will have had the same problem. They've posted a YouTube video on how to do it. And kind of like the key motto that should keep you going through all of this is this sort of like, don't worry, be crappy line. Because as we sort of build this thing, it's all about iteration, doing something that works, improving it and making it better and better. And in this way, we get to Apple perfection. We don't start off with Apple perfection. We build something crappy and improve it until it is perfect. That's kind of like a key thing. So before I go sort of towards the next part here, which is really looking at if you are thinking of maybe building something that's a little bit more bespoke, so out of the box tools don't work, and we really go into building a tech company in a way. Let's break here for a moment and sort of see if you've got any questions and anything else to discuss here.
No, but I think what you are sharing with us is hitting the spot. If I'm looking at some of the responses that we're getting, so thank you so much. I have a question here that says, what are the best free tools to use for chatbots? design, copy, social, etc. I
Mhm.
will also mention, before I ask you to respond to this question, that tomorrow we have Jurek Sikorski, who is going to focus his entire talk on how we sell on these kinds of platforms that you'll be building after today's session. And then on Monday, we have Musa Kalenga back with us, and he is going to focus his entire talk on how you market. So those two sessions build beautifully on what Norbert is sharing with us today. But I think the question really is around more tools. Do you want to respond to that, Norbert, or do you want to point us forward in your presentation?
Okay, so if I understood, the question was more tools around chatbots, or Luis, what the question was
Yes,
around
that's
chatbots?
right. The question was around other free tools around chatbots, social media, etc., and those kinds of plugins.
Yeah, so I'm going to throw a number of more tools out there, specifically around chatbot. If I just jump back a bit, there is something which is called chatbot.com, which is actually quite good. Comes with a bit of free use as well, and it's relatively straightforward to use. I quite like something which is called Landbot, which is on this slide as well, simply because it's very, very easy to use. It's a bit cheaper. Yeah, effectively, we don't have too much time, because otherwise I probably would have shown you some of those key tools and how they work, just to show you how simple it is to really use them. And again, Landbot is something that's extremely easy to use. You kind of like drag and drop your messages in the order that you want it around. And it's one of those tools where if I tell you today, go and build a chatbot, you're like, oh, what? How do I build a chatbot? But if you actually just sign up to Landbot and play around with this tool for 15 minutes, you'll be turning around to me and say, yeah, sure, I'll build a chatbot for you, because it's that simple. And sign up is free. You get to use the tool for free for, I think, a month or so. So most of those things you have to just try out. If there is specific interest around chatbots or this kind of tools, then again, I can put maybe something later together and add that to the slides. But I think the slides will be circulated.
Yes, indeed.
Anyway. Okay, so let's look at developing some stuff here first then. Okay, so if maybe you do think you do really want to build your own app, which is cool, right? You could launch your own app on the iStore or on the Google Store, on the Android Store, or you could create your own website and launch that. Then maybe you're thinking, okay, I've got this idea. What do I need next? And maybe you're thinking, okay, I'm going to need some developers for that, some programmers, because I can't develop any code myself. So you might be like, okay, I need some programmers. But the reality is that in the first instance, you don't need any developers. The first thing that you need is you need a designer. And when I say a designer, then in the first instance, the recommendation would be that you yourself become a designer. And this can be done really quickly, right? So I mean, let's say if I want to become a designer, the quickest way would be, let's say, if you can use a tool like PowerPoint and say, okay, well, I'm going to do my new dragon dating app, kind of like a thing here. I upload my picture. I can maybe rate my dragon on there, and it takes me back to my home screen. And in this way, I could relatively quickly map out and design what kind of app I actually have in my mind. What are the ideas that you have? What should the functionality be of your product? And in the first instance, that's the way to do it. It's a process which is called wireframing, where you kind of like create this kind of like simple mock-ups of what your software actually should be doing. And you can use pen and pencil for that. It's perfectly fine. You can use a PowerPoint, or in this case, what I've used, Keynote for it. If you want to go a little bit more professional, then you could use something which is called Sketch, which is a tool that you can download. And there are many free tools around this as well. So I'm just giving maybe sort of the top tools out at the moment, but if you search for wireframing or mockup tools, you'll find quite a few. And how do you have to imagine these tools? In these tools, everything's ready for you. So let's say a typical mobile phone screen, any kind of like app that you can imagine, all the elements that you see in there, the buttons, the keys, the numbers, any kind of things or stuff that you have on a website, it's already made there for you, like a piece of Lego kit. And all you have to do is like drag stuff around, and very quickly you can visualize the app that you have in your mind in a really high professional level. And sort of if you have those screens, then there are other tools like InVision or InVision app. And again, there are alternatives to this, and they allow you to connect those screens. So imagine you've drawn even, let's say, your PowerPoint stuff, or you've got your things, you upload those to something like InVision, and then you can say, well, if I click on my rating button, then maybe bring up this other screen, and this is how the screen looks like. And InVision will take all of this stuff and actually put it into a nearly working app or website, yeah, that you can also download. You can download that to your phone, or you can take it wherever you go on your phone. And if you sort of like simple, like same as you would do with a PowerPoint presentation, if you load it up, it simulates exactly how it's working. And that's really mighty powerful, especially at the start of when you're trying to do something, because what that will allow you to do is, if you're ready to go and talk to developers, you're very, very easily and very clearly, you can explain to them what it is actually that you're trying to do and that you want them to program, because there is a lot of scope to understand things wrong when sort of explaining what to do with programmers. So you want to be really clear. But also most importantly, it allows you to test your idea. And that's sort of like where we have to take a small step back first as well, because developing or starting a tech company, it's going to take some time, or launching a product. And that's sort of why Luis already mentioned that in the introduction. We've got this thing called the minimal viable product, right? The minimum viable product, or the MVP. And that's kind of like the minimum kind of like product that you think you can get away with your customers without them complaining. Kind of like the minimum thing that needs to be working for this to be great. So, and again, it's kind of like built on this model of don't worry, be crappy, and really embracing this in a way as a methodology to building tech products, to building tech products. And in a way, this sits at the opposite end of what Apple does. So if you've ever bought an Apple product, they are perfect, right? So you buy them, the boxes are perfect. They have a whole engineering team that spends, they've got 10 people working on, when you open the box, how fast the box should open, what sound it should make, what the texture and the feel of this is. That's even before we get to the rest of the product. But the reality is that this approach still works for Apple because they're a giant billion-dollar company, but they have been beaten at this game now a number of times by smaller startups. And one of the biggest ways they have been beaten, for example, competing against bigger companies, is, for example, if we look at something like Google Maps. Some of you, if you have an Apple phone, might be using something called Apple Maps, but the reality is nobody uses that. In the same way that almost nobody or very few people use Microsoft Bing instead of Google. And why is that? Because really Google is the master of being don't worry and be crappy. They have a history of releasing products barely finished, throwing them out, letting people test them, get a lot of feedback on what they should improve, and improving in an iterative way to perfection. And they definitely beat, for example, Apple in this way, by starting with something that is crappy rather than perfecting beyond closed doors until it's ready. So you don't want to do that. You don't want to perfect behind closed doors. You want to get stuff out quickly. especially when you're building a tech product. Before you spend any money on this, you really want to make sure that your idea actually works. You want to make sure that your app idea or your website idea, before you spend any money, you want to make sure that there is something there that it will work. And the only way to do this is really with getting out of the building, or goobing, as it's called. Get out of building, goobing. And now you're going to say, okay, well, I'm in lockdown. Why are you telling me to get out of the building? So how do we translate this get out of the building strategy into a lockdown strategy? And maybe to explain the concept of this sort of lean startup methodology maybe a little bit better, though, is in the first instance, what you're trying to do is maybe one really good way to do this is with a fake website, or with what we call sort of a concierge experiment. And the most famous example around this would be a company called Zappos, a shoe manufacturing company that was selling shoes online. And these days it's perfectly okay if somebody tell you they're going to sell shoes online, you're probably going to be like, yeah, sure, why not? Let's sell shoes online. But when these guys started the company, that wasn't a given. Nobody knew that people would be buying shoes online. So rather than spending a lot of money on developing an e-commerce platform to sell shoes and maybe buying a lot of stock of shoes that they could sell online, what these guys did was this guy Nick Swinburne, he went to his local store, took some pictures of shoes that were in the store there, created a fake website, put the pictures of those photos up on this website, put a small ad in a local newspaper or on online, people clicking through, liking the shoes, and when they click buy, he went to the store, bought those shoes, and shipped them to them. So he didn't buy anything up front, only once they're bought, he sent them. And sort of within 4, 5, 6 weeks, he knew everything that he needed to know to decide whether he would do this business for real or not. And the most important thing, of course, was how many people are going to return shoes. Yeah, so what's sort of the return rate going to be? Is this going to be a profitable business, or are people going to just send endless shoes back home? And with this very simple fake test, he was able to figure that out. And most of the time for most businesses, this is really the way to go. Because remember, right at the start, we say it's very easy to create these websites using the website builders. Maybe if you have a very good idea, you first test it out with a slightly different brand name or slightly different functionality with one of those sites. You keep that site going for a week or 2 weeks. You gather feedback, see if it's working. And once you have got a confirmation for it, then you shut it down. And after that, you launch the real thing. So you try to test whether there is demand for it. There is a whole methodology around it. I don't really have time. It's called Lean Startup. Typically, we'll run several sessions on this, on how to do all of those experiments, how to do custom interviews, all this sort of stuff. We don't have the time to do it. So I'm just going to recommend one video that you should watch on this topic, which is really good and sums up this really well. And that's the link for it. So I'm not going to say anything more on that here. Okay. So maybe let's take a break again to see if there are any questions here at the moment. Or otherwise, I'll just continue and throw a few more things at you.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Norbert. I think this is hugely helpful. I think what I'm sensing around this community is like an intent focus. There's a couple of questions that came through actually about where to learn more. Well, one of our participants, Tom Blackett, says, Norbert, do you have a written book on the subject, or are there books that you can recommend? Or where do I go to gain a deeper knowledge on building a startup for a non-techie? Somebody else says, where do we go for courses on the subject? What are your recommendations? Where do people go to deepen their knowledge in this particular area?
There isn't really something formal, I'm afraid. I mean, I've picked up most of these things. So I've been lucky that I went through with one of my startups through what's called the Tech Accelerator program. where I was in a very nice space in London with 20 other very early stage startups, where we went through a 9-month acceleration period where you pick up a lot of these things. But a lot of this stuff effectively is in the startup communities or hot centers in, let's say, Silicon Valley, in London, in other places where there are communities of tech startups, and they exchange information with each other on how to do it. You can find most of this stuff on blogs, on places online, and maybe I'll add a few after this to the presentation as well, in terms of places that you can look. But it's barely taught in formal courses, and sort of the really practical stuff on how to do it is rarely taught in practical courses. I mean, we've started to introduce a few at Henley here in the UK, but it's unfortunately, even a lot of entrepreneurship courses these days, they're still a little bit more theory heavy and not super practical on the tool stuff, unfortunately. And because these things change so quickly, I also can't recommend too many tools on this. A classic on the topic might be a book called Lean Startup. So that is still hugely valid, but most of the stuff would be in online forums. I don't know if you're aware of Quora, which would be a place to look at. And then there's some key blogs like TechCrunch and this sort of things, where people just share how they do things, tech stories. I'll add these sort of things later on to the presentation.
No, but this is why we've got you here. So you guys are getting the news hot off the press as things stand at the moment, because it sounds like it changes very quickly. But part of what I hear you say is that it's helpful to get involved in a community, right? So when you get involved in something like Quora or TechCrunch, get involved with a group of people that are learning and doing this stuff together.
One thing that I just remembered also, there's in the UK, there's a website called workinstartups.com. Again, I'll add the link later on. And what the situation is in the UK, of course, is that some people are getting furloughed, and some of them are also developers. And so what you can do at the moment is, if you have got a project, you might submit it on this website, and there might be a programmer or some techie who actually picks up your project and says, okay, well, I'm not allowed to work for my main job, but I'm very happily volunteer for a startup from South Africa, where I'm going to devote maybe the time while I'm laid off, and I'm going to work for those guys for free, because that's what they can do, and it would also be encouraged by their companies. So that might be also something where you can tap into talent here.
That is awesome. Thank you. Just a couple more questions, quick ones here. Zach says, what is the link for the Lean Startup video, please? If we could perhaps share that afterwards.
Yeah.
And then Musi Nkomo says, I want to do, hang on, was that the one that I wanted to answer? Musi Nkomo says, I want to develop a mobile app with free applications available on the net. I need more info. I'm not sure I fully answer your question, Musi. I think for the moment, Musi, please feel free to give me a little bit more information so that I can share that question. But let me come to Leanne's question. And I think with that question, I'm going to hand over to you for the last part of your presentation, Norbert. But what she says is she would like to take it a step back. And before the tools, just the ideation. How do we get to that idea? So can you suggest some tools for the ideation phase, some tools and techniques that we can use to help us think or to stimulate thinking on what online business to start?
Yeah, I mean, I wish we could run a whole session on this topic as well, and maybe even do some live ideation session while we're all sitting in our own rooms. I think that would be a cool session to run as well. Maybe to just start off with, sort of on this question, I would, I kind of like took this part initially out of the presentation. Maybe I should have left it in. But typically, the best place to start is the number one entrepreneurial strategy is scratch your own itch. That still is the number one entrepreneurial strategy. So trying to solve a problem that you experience yourself, and try to sort of develop a solution for that. And why is that the still best entrepreneurial strategy for finding an idea? Is because if you know what the problem is, then you typically also know if the solution that you come up for this actually solves that problem, if you would use this yourself. So you've got a good idea, an understanding of whether it would solve your problem. And there's kind of like a little bit of a method around what we call sort of guesstimating, where we can, if you're experiencing this problem, where we can get to a view of what the market size could be, right? So if there's one person who's got this problem, how many other people could there be who've got the same problem? And then based on that, we can spin it even further and think like, well, if we tweak it a bit, maybe that group is even bigger. So that's one way to go about it. The second one we've already looked at in a way, which is taking inspiration from what is out there, and that is looking at possibly other countries, looking at what exists in a way, and sort of trying to find the gap around that. But there is also a process to run ideation sessions and to develop ideas by yourself or in a group, and there's kind of like a structured process around that. And I'll also add one slide on maybe some books or resources around that, how you can get yourself into that creative zone and take inspiration in terms of like how to do that.
Thank you so much.
Okay, then if you're ready, I'm gonna throw another few slides at you, and then we'll just do Q&A. Okay?
Perfect. Let's go for the last bit.
Okay. I'm feeling sorry for you guys because I'm throwing lots of slides at you, but I thought, okay, well, here's a brain dump from me on some tools. And if you're serious about the topic, then even if just 2 or 3 people maybe really think that they got a value out of that and can do something serious with it, I would think that would be a brilliant outcome in a way. Okay, so so far we've kind of like talked about, you don't need a techie, okay? Just use the existing frameworks and basically learn the stuff yourself. It's a bit of a learning curve, but most of the things you can learn within a couple of hours. A lot of those things, the learning curve is like, okay, you figured it out in a couple of minutes, some of them a few hours. If you want to do really something which is more complex, where maybe somebody fills out a form over here, and then there's something that happens in the back end, as we sort of say, some complex stuff, and then something else happens over here, some result gets displayed or something gets sent off in an automated way. So if you're starting to do something that is a little bit more complex, again, in the first instance, you don't necessarily need any developers for that. So there is tools out there which are very, very powerful, which can build entire applications, again, just with saying, I want to do this, and when that happens, I want that to happen. Kind of like a sentence in a way. That's how those tools work. And you can get really far with a tool called Zapier, which allows you to connect pretty much anything. So you can connect pretty much any popular application out there can be connected with another application, with a Google form, with your email, with this kind of things. And you can build really complex workflows, automations with this tool. And it's a very simple tool again. So before we build something, last sort of attempt from me to discourage you to do that by using maybe these tools, which are great tools really. But if you really want to persist and actually build a software startup, a tech company, then you need to be aware of what your role will be. And kind of like the ideal software startup team consists of kind of like 3 different role types. So we've got the ideal startup team consists of the hipsters, the hackers, and the hustlers. Yeah, and so the hackers are typically the programmers, the engineers. The hipsters, those might be maybe people who do design, or maybe who people who do social media. They're the people who create hype in a way and make your product cool so that a lot of people feel attracted to it. That's kind of like the role of the hipsters on this. And then every startup needs a hustler, and that's more or less in some ways the most important role and the person that adds the most value. And that's very, very similar to any kind of business that you might be running already. That's your role effectively. So that's a person who can sell what the other people are doing and promote it and get everyone together. That's kind of like the hustler role. If you are starting a company by yourself, it's going to be very likely that you're going to be the hipster and the hustler to start off with. And maybe down the line you fall into one of the category. But I can't stress enough that there are so many programmers out there who start their own tech idea and it goes never anywhere. I mean, the number of people, of programmers that I've seen who work on a side project that never goes anywhere is astonishing. Why? Because they don't have any business skills and they build something for themselves. They don't care about the customers in a way, and they're too shy, or it's just not in their personality to really go and turn this into a business. Where likewise on the other end, I have seen people who are really good at business just build technology, which is poor technology, but they're good at marketing, they're good at selling, and those are becoming big businesses. So when it comes down to it, I would say probably that is the more important skill and something that hopefully we should all be feeling competent with. So if you're trying to go down actually building your own software company, be aware that that might be the role that you will definitely have to take on. But let's say you're trying to build a software company and you are going to hire or build a technology team, then maybe the first thing to be aware of is that this is really complex. It's getting quite complex. So when we sort of say writing software, maybe the first thing that we have to separate is something called the front end, which is what you see of an application, and the back end, which is all the stuff that happens on a server, in the databases, these sort of things. And developers are also specialists. So some of them, like building a house, some people might be good at some people you bring in for painting and for the windows, your front end people, but the pipes and the brickworks, other people specialize in that. There are a few developers out there who do both. That's called a full stack developer, which is something that's become a little bit more popular. But traditionally, there is kind of like a separation between people who focus on stuff where they build something in a database, but when they give you that stuff, nobody knows what to do with it because either it looks really ugly or it's unusable, or people who are really good at making things interact and engaging, but they are not necessarily so good to do anything complicated. So if you're lucky, you find a person who can do both, but in reality, it might not be the case. So I think a point to make is there are different specialisms involved in building software. And because of that, especially at the start, where maybe you don't have a lot of money or no money, there's only two ways probably to get around with that, unless you find a full stack developer. And that is maybe to start off with, you are outsourcing some of that stuff. So you go with the millions of outsourced companies out there, which as soon as you post on one of those forums, they will never let you alone again, and they will email you every month on how great they are. But there is an advantage of using outsourced companies at the start, because they typically have got all the experts in the company, or they will tell you so. And if you are clear on your specifications and say, I want this to be built, you might be able to get something done relatively cheaply, especially if you sort of like outsource about that. I've also had some negative experiences with outsourcing. So the better way, especially if you're looking to build something for the longer term, is not to hire a team, but actually to start build a team. And the first sort of cornerstone of that would be for you to find a co-founder, to find a technical co-founder. That would be really the smartest strategy that you could pursue. And again, this is, I don't know how many programmers or developers you know. Maybe you don't know any. I didn't know any when I started. I'm lucky that I work in a university, so it's maybe easier to reach out to find students or other professors who are in the field. But likewise for you, it should be easy. It should be relatively easy. You know, universities, colleges around. Those might be first great ports of call to find this kind of people. There are also technical or platforms where you can find co-founders. If it doesn't exist in South Africa, then one of you should start this now, right? So this is a need. This is something that's typically done locally. Somebody needs to put a board up and say, I'm organizing this. Here, let's do that. So that is something that needs to happen. And you are all the ecosystem. You're all the entrepreneurial founder ecosystem. And you create the ecosystem. So one of you needs to say, I'm doing this, join me here. Okay. And then sort of the reality with most developers is they develop stuff. A lot of them are working for companies that they don't find particularly exciting. It's a job like any other. So if they're given the opportunity to maybe join a startup where they can do something new, where they can get a little bit more freedom, then that is a good opportunity for them. And many of them will take a pay cut or even sometimes work for free for it if you give them a share in the business. So that's kind of like how it works. You have to, and you should give your technical co-founder a share or equity in the business, because then they are invested in it. And for them, it's kind of like approaching a good employee and telling them, if you join my company, then you are the CTO, you're the Chief Technical Officer. It's an instant promotion for them. For most developers, if they work on a project somewhere between 2 or 6 months, they're okay if they take a little bit of a hit in terms of their pay, because they get to learn new skills. They are facing no problems typically to get rehired into the market. Most developers who have worked or done a stint at a startup and then join the next company earn a higher salary afterwards if it shouldn't work out. So for them, the risk is the risk profile of a developer leaving a job to join your startup is not too bad, right? So if you've got, you should be able to convince someone, and there will be people out there looking for opportunities. They're always looking. So try to find a co-founder. There is a whole thing around shareholders agreements to do here around as well, where if you give someone and you invite someone to be your co-founder, you do something called vesting, where they have to earn their shares. So if it doesn't work out, you're not left stranded with someone holding shares in your company that you don't want to work with anymore. So there's something to look at around that maybe we can't fully cover here today, but maybe as a point to throw out. Try to build a team, but be smart about it by using the right agreement for that. And again, there are template contracts on the web to do that. And when you actually go to try building these products, I'm coming to an end here, because otherwise we're probably going to go too much into detail. But the same thing applies in a way to write what we talked about at the start. These days, there are so many applications that have been written, whether it's mobile phone applications, web applications, or hardware applications. A lot of code has been written, and this kind of code sits in code libraries. And when your developer comes and builds your website, they're not writing everything from scratch. They're kind of like drawing on these libraries, and they put those libraries together relatively quickly to build you something, and they can build things really quickly these days. And sort of like a number of those frameworks are out there. Drupal, for example, is one way of building things really quickly. You can also get wholesale code clones on the web. So a friend of mine recently built a platform for homeschooling, which is like a marketplace where people can offer their services on training or sort of for kids to have some homeschooling opportunities. And what she did was she spent $500 and bought a full clone of the Airbnb code online. So that gives you the whole functionality of Airbnb. She bought that for $500, and then she spent, I think, another $1,000 to modify that to her branding and to her custom process. And she had the full functionality of everything that's involved in Airbnb for about $1,500. If you were trying to rewrite the whole thing from scratch, you would probably spend $500,000 to $1 million at least to get to anything like it. So just search in a way if you've got an idea on the web as well for this code libraries. They're all there. If you want to build something more bespoke, things like Bootstrap. Now it's getting a bit too technical, so I'm not going too much further into that. They allow you to build things extremely quickly. It's not something that you might be aware of before you've actually started to do it. But yeah, you can get these things going really quickly. Okay, last thing, and I'll stop, last thing, and that is, if you're trying to do a tech company or a startup, there is a lot of free stuff out there for you. So you get everything from free service space. For example, Amazon offers $10,000 for 2 years, or $100,000 of server space for 1 year for free to startups. You get payment gateways like Stripe if you have to pay, if you have to include payments, this kind of things. You get those things for free. You get free artificial intelligence stuff. There are so many discounts for startups, for tools out there if you want to build something. It's crazy. So even if you've got low or no money, there is a lot of tools that you get for free if you know where to look in the right place. I've put one link up there where you can find some of those free offers, where you get some of those things. But yeah, there are many more places to look. And typically, if you ask, a lot of companies also in the UK, they will just give you stuff for free or at a heavy discount if you say that you're a startup, especially if you're a startup from South Africa. Okay, I'll leave it here because I'm sure it was like, what? Crazy, but yeah. Okay. One last thing here, and that's basically, I don't know if you've ever seen the first YouTube video, which is this guy, me at the zoo. And that's just really just to say, this is what YouTube started off looking like, right? Relatively ugly. And YouTube was a dating website where you could upload a video of yourself and say, hey, this is me, I'm looking for someone else. And again, we could do a whole session about companies and how they've pivoted to do something completely else by the stuff that they've learned by throwing the first things out, but we don't have the time. Okay, I'll leave it here. Questions?
Thanks so much, Norbert. We have got literally 4 minutes for questions, and there are some questions, and we're going to have to fit them in very, very quickly. Can I ask you to please close your presentation?
Yep.
Firstly, as you were saying that there's a lot of content to share, there were a lot of people that said thank you for what you're sharing and that they are finding it enormously useful. What you've put together for us is effectively a toolkit for people to get started and get moving. And that is exactly what they're needing right now. So I think the sooner we can get this out to our community, the better as well. So we're going to try and get that from you and get it uploaded for you guys to start to use, to start to play with as soon as possible. Okay, Norbert, are you ready for rounds of speed question answering?
Yes, yeah, I'll be like chop, 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 chop.
Okay, fantastic. So the first question is Jermaine van der Berg, and she is saying, this might be a silly question, it is not. Please could you explain the difference between the website and mobile app in terms of development?
Yeah, so absolutely not a silly question. First of all, mobile development and web development, slightly different programming languages, but even if you have a mobile application, it has a back end. So some stuff, that's how it looks on your phone, but it will connect to something that's on the back end development. So if you're developing an application, very often this backend is the same whether you're a web application or a mobile application. It's just where you are delivering it. And these days there's also sort of like the the rise of the mobile responsive web application, which means sort of like web apps that work across mobile devices as well. That's new programming languages like React or Angular. So if you go into deep technical stuff, we don't have the time, but if you pick this kind of programming languages, then it's very easy for you to do both of those things at the same time.
Thank you. Another question. Who does one contact to host a website versus a mobile app?
So with a web app, you do it all yourself. With just hosting the stuff, if you go to Wix, Squarespace, Webflow, this kind of tools where you just launch your website, they come with their own hosting. They will host everything for you. You don't have to worry about it at all. The only thing maybe that I recommend is that you go to GoDaddy or name.com or any kind of domain registrar and you buy your own domain name. So you've got your own web link that's branded to you, and then that will direct to Wix, Squarespace, this kind of stuff, and everything set up.
Fantastic, thank you very much. Muzi says, I'd like step-by-step assistance to develop a mobile app using free tools available. Who do I go to? There are some blog posts out there. You just have to search, but it's not something that there isn't too much that takes you step by step in a way. But it really also depends what you're trying to do. So maybe I'm going to quickly do this. Don't shoot me down. Whoops. Here is my email as well. So if you want to email me, go and email me. And maybe if I can figure out what you should be doing, I will let you know. Okay? If you send me a brief. Thank you. And I think we will share those details with you as well. I'm speaking to Carmen Murray, who's holding social media in the background, so that she can share that with us. Thank you. A comment, I'm loving this. Don't feel sorry for us, dear Norbert. You rocked today's session. Thank you very much. And then how much money would you put aside to bootstrap our idea? Bearing in mind that you work in a world of pound and euro and we work in a world of rand. So let's work in a world of pound, shall we?
Yeah. It depends. I think if you're serious about your idea, then in pounds worth, I think you have to start probably with 2,000. You can get away with free for a lot of time. Then maybe the thresholds you should set yourself are maybe 2,000 pounds, 5,000 pounds, 10 to 12,000 pounds. I've seen people launch complicated things for 25,000 pounds, and other people have launched stuff for 500,000. It's just how cheaply you can get away with. If you get a technical co-founder who works with you, you might not have to spend anything, you know. But yeah. The reality is that typically you might have to spend something to start with.
Okay, all right. So it's tricky to answer.
It's tricky to answer. Depends on the idea again. But yeah.
A couple of comments I'm quickly going to run by everybody. Rennie says, I like the idea of building a team, especially as us technical people has no social skills or little. Well, debatable, but thank you. Anonymous says, I'm in my late 40s. My teenagers will make a competent tech team. I'm just worried about what their payment terms will be. They already have access to resources for free and the expertise. Thank you so much for these sessions.
Oh, that sounds like a great
Anonymous says, where is your turtleneck, Norbert? They want the turtleneck. Thank you very much. What is the website next to Drupal called in your slides? I think we'll share the slides and then you're welcome to have a look. Margin says, fabulous session. Thanks so much. Gave us lots of avenues to explore. Can't wait to do so. That is a thank you. I'm trying to see if there are any other questions. There's lots of appreciation here. Norbert, you are an absolute superstar. Guys, can we give the man a round of appreciation? He won't hear it, but I'm sure he'll feel it where he is. You are a superstar and you really have helped set us up magnificently. Over the next 2 days, everybody, tomorrow, please tune in. We've got Jurek. He'll be speaking to us about once you've got this set up, how do you move into sales in a very real way? He has a lifetime worth of experience from a sales point of view, so he can get you some very real experience, and he'll be talking about some of the same platforms that Norbert talked about, but from a very different point of view. And then on Monday, we've got Musa Kalenga back with us, and he's going to be talking about marketing. And again, these two elements build beautifully on what Norbert put in place for us today. So who knows, you might be a tech entrepreneur before you know it, a unicorn or a cockroach that becomes a unicorn. These are the way things work. Now, okay, just about my earlier thing. So it is indeed Freedom Day on Monday. That might influence your choice. I think my brain had a fritz because of the irony of the fact that it is indeed Freedom Day on Monday. I would also just like to point out that I did think that it was September. So that is my mistake. Apologies, and thank you for everybody that put me back on the right track. It is time for us to play out. And what I'm going to play us out with today, get your hips ready to move, is, let me quickly get this up and running for us. Okay, we are in Francophone Africa today. We are in the beautiful Côte d'Ivoire, and this is an invitation to dance the Zindaka. And if you don't know how to dance the Zindaka, then allow the French African voice, which is very seductive, as well as your hips to lead the way, and voila, we're all leading into new territory, so we may as well dance away there. Thanks so much for joining us today, everybody. Have a fantastic long weekend.